Hello and welcome to another discussion in this Discworld reading group. That's a bit of a tongue twister I didn't expect, but we've been working our way through the Discworld books one a month. So the book we're talking about today is Mort, which is the fourth in the series. Coming up next month will be Sorcery. We haven't set the date for that yet, but these discussion groups, as with pretty much everything we do on Patreon, are open to anybody interested. So if you'd like to join us either here in the actual discussion or talk to us about them on the forum, consider checking out the Page Chewing forum. With me, of course, I have some wonderful guests, Jose and Susanna. Could you start us off by introducing yourselves? Maybe Jose first. That was confusing.
Thank you, Varsha. Well, I'm Jose. I run the Jose's Amazing Worlds YouTube channel, where we do also book reviews and author interviews and general sort of fantasy book discussions. And I also host the Fantasy Talks Live podcast. Thank you.
And hello, my name is Susana Imaginario. I'm the author of Weird Gods and other books, and I run the YouTube channel Den of the Weird.
Very nice. So Mort is, I guess, uh, wide, widely known as maybe the book that sort of set Terry Pratchett on to writing about 30 more books in this world. So Equal Rites, I think, is considered good and many people like it, but people tend to ignore the first two in the list of books they like for Discworld. So what do you guys think? High level impressions and thoughts?
I'll let Susanna go first because it was her first time reading Mort, so I'm curious
Yeah.
to hear.
All right, thank you. Well, yeah, it was the first time. This has been on my TBR for years and years and years. I've read a few books. I've read the Guards, the Night Watch series, and I read The Color of Magic. And I was hoping to join in the discussion last month, but then I failed to read the previous book. So yeah, finally, I because I wanted to read the series. It's been on my TBR for years, and I've been trying to read like one book a year, but yeah, there's more than 30, so I really needed to pick up pace. So thank you for letting me join in, and this little bit of motivation. And yeah, I loved it. I mean, it's so much fun. It was exactly what I needed. Uh, Terry Pratchett's writing is just no one writes like this. I mean, it's so much wit. It's I think my review, if it can be called a review that I left on Goodreads or something like wit overdose. Um, it's brilliant. So yeah, to answer your question, I'm very impressed with the book and very happy that I read it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's very enjoyable rereading the books on a second time because you pick up so many more things on a second read. It's a bit like now I am rewatching the Game of Thrones TV show with my wife, and we're both picking up on more things that the first time we we didn't realize. So it's because I've read the whole series and I loved it. It's kind of like meeting old friends, and it's very comfortable and it feels very nice um, and comforting rereading Discworld. So I'm really enjoying it and possibly appreciating them more on this second round than I did first time.
Um,
No, and that was my sort of low level impression or high level impression, whatever you want to say. So, what was your take on it, Barsha?
oh, yeah, I think did the first three books we meet death but briefly, and I think he really makes an impression, at least on me he did, even the few times he showed up on page. So I was thrilled to have a book dedicated pretty much to death and, watching how he works and him, and like, I love this notion of him getting himself an apprentice, and in between he has himself an existential crisis. That the whole thing, I think, just on the level of ideas and concepts, I think it was absolutely brilliant, at least like as a basis for the story. And I was thrilled to have as much depth as I got. Based on the title of the book and how it started, I almost thought it might be a bit of an origin story for Death, but it didn't turn out to be. Like the first time, I was a little stumped by that, but pleasantly surprised by how it didn't turn out to be his origin story. Because imagining Death's origins as this weird, awkward boy, uh, that well, that tickled the imagination, but I didn't want that for him. But also, we start with, I think the sort of prologue sort of thing starts with telling us that death has existed from the beginning of time and will continue even after Great Atuin dies. So, so it couldn't. I think we quickly realized that it's not exactly his origin story, but I love the coincidence of Mort, his name, and some of the side characters are really cool too, with Isabel and Princess Kelly and Albert. They're all just like really funny. It does, and it I could be projecting based on what I know about this book, but it's really like Terry Pratchett finding his groove even more than he did in the previous books, and like doubling down on this wonderful character that he created. And it has a little bit of that farm boy trope, right? Like being whisked off to do wonderful things, thing that, except, the farm boy is this awkward boy with too many limbs, and the wizard doing the whisking off is Death himself. So, yeah, I think overall, I do love this story quite a bit.
Well, I mean, just to your point, it is nothing is written by coincidence in this world.
Yeah.
So that the boy is called Mortimer or Mort, it's not a coincidence. Everything is
Oh, yeah.
everything is done for a reason. Um, but yeah, the one thing I sort of tried to pay more attention on this second read is not so much the jokes, it's not so much the setting, but like what's the book trying to say? What's the deeper theme? Because all these books have a deeper theme. Like in Equal Rites, we talked about it. So I was trying to figure that one out here. I don't know what your impressions are, Varsha or Susanna. What do you think the book is trying to say?
Simple thing. So as Sasha was saying, it subverts all the fantasy tropes pretty much. The farm boy, it's not quite a farm boy, and the mentor is death itself, or himself, I should say. And so, yeah, he's playing with us. This is. Don't take this too seriously. But here's the thing. Um, so I liked how we like the relationship of um, between the two couples, because he sets out and then doesn't kill the princess, and you kind of expect, oh, because of course the knight in the shiny armor is gonna save the princess, but how the relationship between him and Isabel and the princess and the maid kind of go in parallel to, against what you should expect. And I think that's a good. It's all the entire book is like that. You expect that to be evil, and kind of is, kind of not. Is just doing his thing. Then there's an actual maid that, it's unlike any maid. It is. I think it's a book about growing up, about living rather than death. Just finding your path, your life. It's a coming of age story, just done in a very witty way.
I mean, there's a little bit of a obvious death is inevitable and do what you can while you're here, sort of not quite message, I guess, underlying theme a little bit. Because we meet a lot of people who, in the moments after they've died, right? Like as Death and Mort go to collect the souls, and we see how they all deal with it. There's the witch who wants to hang around in her like new form, who she's always been underneath, even though she's become this old uh old wrecked person. When she dies, the form she takes is that of her 19-year-old self. And she's like, this is who I've always been inside. I thought that was really deep and
Mhm.
profound, because I feel like for a long time I've only felt 10 years younger than I am. Like, the mirror disagrees, but inside my head. um,
Yeah.
and and then there's the guy who is like just resigned to the fact that he'll be reincarnated again. And like, there's just a lot of people that we meet who have all these various attitudes towards death. I thought that was pretty enlightening. And about Mort himself, it's, yeah, I like what you said, Susanna, about growing up and maybe like being comfortable in himself. That's what he learns to do. I mean, not that Mort has ever not been comfortable, it's people around him who haven't been comfortable with how he feels about himself or like how he carries himself. But mostly, I think he's been fine and he grows into it. And he's been allowed and given the room to grow in Death's world, strangely enough. And he kind of blossoms, doesn't he? Like, becomes someone, like, he makes a few dumb decisions along the way, but he becomes someone you can reckon with. And so, I don't know, like, I was thinking maybe it's Mort learning to become comfortable with himself, but as I'm thinking about it now, I think it's more that he's been given the room to become comfortable with himself, because his uncle and father were like, nudging each other and looking at how awkward the kid is and wondering what the heck they are to do with him. Death has no such compunctions. He went out looking for Mort. He actually chose Mort. We see the beginning scene where he's like, yeah, that boy will do. And he brings him over and lets him become who he is. So maybe that's one of the underlying themes. Not sure. Yeah. What did you think, Jose?
Well, I went off on a completely different direction, so it's very interesting to hear both of you bring up those points. For me, the bit that I latched onto, and I think it gets repeated a few times throughout the book, is the whole thing about people not seeing what is in front of them.
Hmm.
So
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
that.
when the princess is meant to have died, but she isn't, like in people's minds, she's dead, and she has to keep going round reminding them that she's still alive. And I don't know whether, like I said, I've gone off on one, but it's this whole maybe self-suggestion or cognitive dissonance, or how sometimes we don't want to see the truth or reality for what it is, and he's trying to say something about the power to lie to ourselves.
Hmm.
So I don't know. I just went off in that direction, and
Yeah.
maybe it's completely wrong. I don't know.
Oh no, I think that's important too.
Yeah.
And it has a bit of it reminds me a little bit of the headology that Granny Weatherwax talks about in the third book, but it's in a different direction. But yeah, I agree. I think that's a very important
Mhm.
theme here too. And I love the way you put it, because it's not just, I was thinking mostly about Death and Mort when they are around and collecting souls, how people can't see them. But also about Kelly. Yeah, I didn't quite extend that to Kelly. I didn't think to that she's right there and nobody's seeing her, and she has to be like, shove things in her face. I think, yeah, that might be a great metaphor for a lot of things. Susanna, were you going to say something? Sorry.
I think that is about denial. I think it's one of the reactions. And I listened. I watched your review this morning, Jose, and so I didn't want to steal the point, but yeah, there's definitely that there. And that reminds me, it's a little tangent, but I don't want to forget about it, because you mentioned in your review that death in Spanish is feminine, and it's the same in Portuguese. But whenever it's represented, the most common way that it's represented, I should say, is as it is portrayed here, the skeleton on the hood with the side, or generally just a skull. But it's seen as male, but it's funny that we refer to it as female.
Yeah,
In,
it'd be curious to know. Uh, Obviously, there's possibly all Latin languages have got gendered nouns. If there's any language in which the noun for death is male, because I think in all Latin languages death is a female noun. certainly in French, in Spanish, in Portuguese, in Italian as well, I believe. So yeah, for me, and yeah, you're right. Whenever death gets depicted in that, Grim Reaper, hooded, cloaked skeleton thing, is it definitely male? Like, I'm not sure. I'm
Like,
it's a
in
pretty,
my mind, I see it as male, but
it's a
and
pretty,
I just realized as I was watching the video, I was like, oh, how interesting.
it's a pretty sexless. It's a skeleton. Like,
Yeah.
no. Like, I get what you're saying. I totally understand. But like, for me, or generally, like, obviously, possibly for you as well, with 4 decades of hearing death in your head and associating it to a female gender, to be told that death is a male, it's a bit of a culture shock. It is something to ponder.
That's interesting. There is a death in Hindu mythology, Yama. I don't know if you probably know Susanna from Lord of Light.
The name. Yeah,
Yeah,
the name.
yeah. He's the Lord of Death. Yama, he's male. So yeah, it's interesting how different cultures like one gender death, but also yeah, you're right about the skeleton being sexless, but still, at least in yeah, there's a male attribute associated with it typically, which in Sandman death is female, and I feel like that was a big subversion of expectation when she shows up on the page. So
But that's maybe because a British or Saxon American audience is used to death being male, whereas for me, when I read Sandman, the fact that death was female was like, as it should be.
Obvious, yeah.
Yeah, like obviously, death is
Hmm.
female. So it's interesting, and I wonder how. I know, like, I'm sure some jokes cannot translate into different languages. Because I loved, by the way. So, what's your favorite joke in the book?
Oh God,
Oh,
it's so many to pick.
yes. It might be the one about the Queons and the Kingons. It's in one of the footnotes. And there's this philosopher who argues, or philosopher or just a drunk person, I don't know, who argues that the the only thing that travels faster than light is monarchy, because as
Yeah.
soon as the king dies, the next person immediately
Yeah.
inherits. So he wants to create a method of communication where he tortures a small king.
Yeah. What about you, Susanna?
Oh, that was a good one. There was something when he was asking advice about going through walls that I thought it was hilarious. And he said to pick thinner walls or something like that I just thought it was funny. And so no actual jokes, but the bits in the prose where he kind of derails into like there was a footnote. Footnotes are easier to find because even though I have the bookmark, these are new for me. It was right at the beginning. Yeah, it was exactly that one, but the bit at the end is ambitious when yes. So everything was going very well, and then because at that point the bar closed, so I laughed because I imagined that it was just something that just come up in the bar in the conversation. Oh, this would go great in the book, and then he realizes, oh no, it doesn't fit. That's okay. I'll just make a footnote, but I actually didn't write anymore, so this is very tense. I mean, that's the sort of thing that I probably would do, and it was
Like,
fun to imagine that side story.
for me, it was the reference to the Hans Christian Andersen tale of the princess and the pea. That you,
Oh, yes.
and how he
That you
just
would see
constantly,
through 10
that she would
mattresses.
pee through 10 mattresses or something, and it's like, oh, okay. And it's such a great play on words, and it's such a great reference to that
And then
classic
when
tale.
later on, when he actually heard it right, that she could feel a pee to 10 mattresses, and that was like, oh, something that he didn't know that it bothered him, and it's just a realization. I thought he got it wrong. Yeah, okay. Just
Yeah, yeah, that
so
that one
many
for me was
details.
on point. And the thing is that as soon as I didn't remember that one, and when I read it, it was like, oh yeah, which sent me down the rabbit hole. And shout out to the people that run the Discworld wiki, because they've got all the literary references in this novel, but it must be in every novel. And I stopped reading after 70. There are so many references to Shakespeare's works, Hans Christian Andersen, songs, popular culture, and I just picked like two or three, and I feel clever. And then turns out that there's a whole, 50-page document referencing everything. So, like I've always said, so Terry
Oh,
Pratchett was an erudite.
do you think that it's all intentional? Come on. I guess some stuff, they're just there in the subconscious, and you just.
I I
Uh,
think it might be intentional. I think Terry Pratchett knew very well, traditional folk tales and literature, and obviously that that pee through the mattress joke.
mm,
I don't think you would just throw in there. You wouldn't. Oh, what joke could I throw in here? Like he knew the story, and he went, okay, I'm gonna go with this. So I don't think at the rate he was writing. Can you imagine researching? I'm going to reference Shakespeare, and I'm going to reference uh, whoever it, 70 plus references to literature, to folk culture. You don't prepare those things and the schedule where you're going to drop in your novel. You just write them as you go along. So I think he knew. Like I said, he was very cultured. He was an erudite. He knew very well what he was writing and what he was doing. And it is a shame that I'm not as intelligent to pick all those things, because I think it'll make reading these books, a far more rewarding experience. But like I said, I picked two or three, and I feel
oh,
good about it.
but a lot of it is cultural. I mean, there's stuff here that go completely over my head because I didn't grow up in England. There's stuff that my husband explains it to be funny. I mean, I think it's not a matter of not being clever enough. There's things here that you had to have lived in this environment.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've always said that Discworld is a very British
Yeah,
series,
very much.
um, because then and we've got all the references to Indian culture, isn't it? Like how is it Clutch? Is the Discworld version of India?
I think so. Or I think I forget where they end up in the next book. That felt a little bit like India, but it turned out I think it was some Middle Eastern reference. But yeah, maybe Clutch is Discworld version of India. But whenever he describes Ankh-Morpork, sometimes he compares it to Kolkata, which not not a big fan of that comparison. uh,
No, and then question, because obviously the book was written in whenever it was 80 whatever. So in that comparison, in that sort of play of making Clutch like sort of the India of the Discworld, when he goes to the carry house, there's this whole thing about the owner is trying. Death goes for a curry. Basically, at one point, Death goes for a curry, and I think he's trying to get ripped off by the restaurant owner, or they're trying to scamming or something like that. And I don't know. There's all these things which I don't know if in today's climate of political correctness, people would make a bigger deal about it than they would have done 40 years ago when the books were written.
I mean, oh, you wouldn't get away with a lot of the stuff in these books if they were written today. Yeah.
Because you've also got uh, there's another culture that is clearly China, isn't it? And they play this tile game, or they do this fortune telling. What does he call it? The I Ching, which apparently is I think in real life it's called the Ching, I think, but he calls it the I Ching. And there's so many things, again, like I said, that I don't know if people wanted to really sort of scan the books, they will find issues with.
yeah, yeah. And the interesting thing about like fantasy books is you in some ways, if you make the connection, then you're the racist because maybe he didn't. I mean, it's hard to figure out for sure whether or not he maybe sometimes it's obvious, but sometimes we think that it looks like a particular culture, but maybe it's not. I don't know. I think it's a fine distinction. So maybe fantasy books get away with a lot more than if you were like outright making statements about said countries.
Yeah, I don't know because I like he's playing on stereotypes, right?
Yeah.
And I've always said, and this applies to me as a Spanish person or anyone, like stereotypes exist for a reason. People don't make them
Exactly.
up.
Yeah.
Let's try to belittle or let's try to mock this culture. Like the stereotypes are exaggerations of a reality. I mean, that's just unquestionable. So he just plays with those. And I think, I mean, that's fine by me, but I don't know if people these days might not be okay with it.
Yeah, I think most of these are, at least the ones I was able to read, are pretty harmless. The only issue I have with the Ankh-Morpork Kolkata comparison is because he's pretty unrelenting on just how horrible Ankh-Morpork is. Like throughout the books, those are his jokes. So, and again, like I don't really mind. It's still a funny joke, in my opinion. But yeah, I think most of these are sort of harmless comparisons that play on either what people think or like what might even be real in some cases.
Sorry, I'm just going to steer the conversation now. What about all those scenes where, and you can tell me what he was trying to say, where Death is trying to understand humanity, where Death is trying to have fun. So there's another scene where they're doing the conga all around some castle, and then Death is at the pub trying to get drunk, and he's asking the bartender, "Oh, is this fun? Is this having fun?" And he keeps drinking and drinking, but I cannot get drunk. So, is it just mocking our, sense of fun that you need to be drunk to have fun or all these things? Or is it just, I don't know, like literally Death, which is the most inhuman person there could be, trying to understand humanity? Is it a criticism or just a thought exercise?
Yeah, it's just trying to understand what it means to be human. Then humans sometimes do stupid things and call it fun. It is part of living. That doesn't understand because the one thing he can't understand is how to be alive. How it feels to be alive. So he tries, but it's not his nature. But
Yeah. I wondered, I think it might be both, to your point. Like it is, of course, this thought exercise of this immortal entity trying to figure out how humans live. But also, some of the things we do for fun are pretty silly. Like take even the drinking out the conga line, for instance, and the
Yeah.
dancing. I think from an external perspective or even from an alien perspective, it's gonna be like, please explain this to me. Why is this something that brings you joy? So I think from that sense, I think it's interesting commentary. I don't think it's necessarily criticism. It's more, hey, look, aren't we a silly species as a whole? Like a bit of self mockery, perhaps.
Yeah. Yeah, possibly, again, one of those things open to interpretation. And since we haven't got his words on what he was trying to achieve there,
Yeah.
but I did really enjoy those scenes with Death doing the conga and
Oh,
Death
yeah.
trying to get drunk.
My favorite one was like, it's pretty early on, I think, in the sequence when he's flipping burgers. And like he's
Yeah.
got his existential crisis going and he's like trying other jobs. Me-
I've been there. I worked at Starbucks one summer, so there you go.
Yep, it's a rite of passage, even for death.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, Mort is becoming more and more like Death. Then I guess the universe is filling the void that Death has created by going off to do the conga and flip burgers.
Yeah, it's another one of the early Discworld books where you have an almost event horizon where the world is almost going to come to. Oh, I don't know, because you've got, obviously, because Mort has destroyed the time-space continuum by saving the princess, there's two realities that are gonna clash. You're not entirely sure what's gonna happen there. And I think it's a theme of the early Discworld books that there's always some kind of almost world-ending event that just gets sort of avoided at the last minute.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
And I think, if I remember, that also happens in moving pictures, and a couple others. And it's not until Guards where things settle down.
Yeah. I think sorcery. I don't remember if there's an end of the world in Weird Sisters, but sorcery definitely has one.
Well, Weird Sisters. Oh no, we're not there yet. Sorry, I was thinking about Equal Rites, where you have these creatures from the other side of the dark, or whatever it's called. Yeah. And this also, I think, is another indication that is early in the series, that when we go back to Unseen University, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that the only wizard I suppose the only two wizards that are still common to the earlier books are the librarian and Rincewind.
Yeah.
Isn't it? So there still seems to be turmoil there. There's still characters aren't set just yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. The reason I know the characters is because we play the board game, so at least I am familiar with the characters and where they are.
Rinspin and the librarian. Ooh. And I didn't know this. Apparently, I know nothing about orangutans. Just a quick detour. My husband was telling me that he watched a video with orangutans where they went ook. So it's an actual noise that they make. I thought Terry Pratchett just made that up.
Yeah. I mean, this is confession moment for me. When someone sends me a message, email or WhatsApp, I never reply okay. I always reply ook. No one gets it. No one gets it. But I do chuckle to myself.
Oh, that's brilliant. Almost want to steal that.
No, go. Hey, I don't have the copyright. Go ahead.
So, one of my favorite things about Discworld, like, of course, it deals with pretty deep themes sometimes and so on, but I love how he casually weaves in science from our world into the stories, or takes that and makes it into something else altogether. Like with the priest in the second person that Mort wants to go has to collect the soul of, who ends up reincarnating. He belongs to that priesthood who just listen for the first words that the creator spoke, and it's the whole thing, I think, is built around the cosmic background radiation, and I guess they build the equivalent of I don't know if this is supposed to be for the gravitational waves, or like we built a bunch of detectors to detect things like this, like neutrinos and whatnot, but the thing that they have built to try and listen to the cosmic background radiation, the equivalent of it, I love that. I love how he took that. I think this is built around the cosmic background radiation, like that whole thing, and turned it into this like enormous joke. but you can also read into that and like make the connection to our physical world. I love that about how easily and casually he does that throughout the books.
There's plenty more of that to come in future books.
Excellent.
No spoiler.
Okay. I look forward to it.
Yeah, it's almost as if you just capture the essence of the thing.
Yeah, exactly. and I love that when the guy who dies, he stops and then he yells loudly just to annoy the priests because they hate noise, because they're listening carefully for tiny changes. Yeah, that whole thing was pretty brilliant. So we talked about Kelly, and were there any like high level topics else? I think we talked through everything that I made notes on. Oh, Death's horse is named Binky. Which is...
It's a very British thing, isn't it? In the same way that the Iron Maiden mascot is called Eddie. It's this zombie skeleton thing, and it's called Eddie. So, of course, Death's horse is called Binky. It's that British self-deprecation, isn't it?
Yeah. And there's Albert with all the ideas that he has about what the horse should be named, which is like just goes to show Death's horse is Binky. I think that was one of the laugh out loud moments in the book. Um, Princess Kelly and Mort trying to change things, interfere in that event. Yeah, I think there's some theme there about like sort of accepting what happens. She ends up surviving, right, eventually, and I don't remember how that comes about after the cataclysmic event, but yeah, I love the descriptions of the unreal landscapes and how things changed and not quite changed. I guess the meeting of the two realities, I think that was brilliantly done.
I like the library where the biographies just kept writing themselves, and
Oh
I mean,
yeah,
so brilliantly done in the book. I see my notes are all about things that I can use. So that's why I didn't mark any jokes or any clever passages like that. But the way that he when they are having the fight and knocking things about, and then you'd see what was happening, you know,
yeah.
every time an hourglass was broken and things like that. It's so clever, so well done.
Yeah, and I love just the concept of the library as a whole,
Of
like this
reading your
tall,
life as it's
endless
being written.
library.
Yes,
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah,
That moment is brilliant, isn't it? When
yes,
they
so
are
good.
climbing the ladder and Albert is coming from behind and they're reading up. It's a great piece of writing.
Yes.
yeah. That's brilliant. And there's also like there isn't a sense of inevitability about these lives, right? They are being written, so there is scope to change. Like, sure, the time of death is firm, and there was. Oh yeah, we have to talk about reannual crops, but we'll get that in a moment. But but I guess it's not set in stone. Like there are fates, and the time of death is firm, and so on in this world. But you can do things to change that, which I think maybe is its own theme. That people, even after they die, they make choices about where they end up or how they choose to live out their afterlife, or in some cases make deals with death to not die at all, like Albert did. um, but yeah, I think I love that for this world, that aspect of like being in control of your destiny. Um, that's pretty nice.
Mm.
So, what did you think of the reannual crops?
The
the
what?
ones that you have to, the ones that you have to plant this year so they can grow last year. uh, and there's this whole note about how the growers of reannual crops, the farmers, have to be introspective and philosophical and whatnot, because if a farmer forgets to, if like a normal farmer forgets to plant, he just won't have crops next year. But if a reannual crop farmer forgets to plant, then he wouldn't have planted what already grew last year. So he's bringing the whole space-time continuum into jeopardy. So they need to be very careful, philosophical creatures, apparently. Like there's this whole description about that. I love that. I thought we also saw that in the last book, but I may be misremembering. But but yeah, I just love that concept. And then this side note about farmers who grow them.
It's probably one of those throwaway things that, so Terry would have thought about when writing the book, and he just shoves it in the footnotes, isn't it? And it's the longest footnotes in the history of writing, isn't it? Sometimes they can take half a page.
Yeah, they're pretty long and detailed footnotes, and they pack a punch. They're always about like really interesting aspects of the world, and they tell so many jokes in them. Yeah, if you're a reader who skips footnotes, don't do that for this series.
Mm-hmm. So, but I confess I don't like them. It's rare the books that I like footnotes, but
Hmm.
these ones don't bother me because yeah, it's always something unexpected.
Yeah, yeah, always. And sometimes it starts out to seem like something that we've, well, at least so far, something that has been said before. Like the one about the Klingons and Queons, it started, I thought it was going to be a rehash of what we've already been told about why light moves slower even than sound on the disc, but it wasn't. It was this whole new concept that he that he brought in, which wasn't actually true, but like this ridiculous and random drunk theory that that this guy had. So yeah, footnotes are pretty cool. Was there anything else that happened in this book that we haven't talked about yet?
No, I think we've sort of covered the ideas that I had. I'm not as an academic reader as Susanna because for obviously no one is seeing the video, but she's holding an annotated copy of Mort with sticky notes poking out different sides, and it's probably underlined and scribbled on the sides. So
Well, there's a reason for it because I usually, as Watson knows, I ban the pages. But this is my husband's copy, which he lended it to me, and it's hardback, not paperback, so I can't break the spine. And he bought me these things just so I wouldn't bend pages. So that's why it looks so organized.
wow.
I've never been as careful with the book as with this one, and it's kind of practice for the Drowned Kingdom. So I'm gonna read next because that one is a paperback, and I'll be dead if I bend the spine. So yeah, this is training. And like I
There
said,
is
my notes are all about clever writing bits or just punctuation things. So they're very dull. I didn't mark any funny bits because I was just I was laughing at some point. It's one of those rare books that really makes you laugh out loud while you're reading.
mm, yeah. I mean, there's two types of people in the world: the ones that fold the corners of books and the ones that don't. Um, and one type is a far better type than the other, Susanna, but I'm not
Fair
going to
enough.
reveal which one.
No one's perfect. But
No, no,
How do
that's
you
my
feel
wife.
about writing in books, Jose? Because I got some stuff to scandalize those who don't like writing. I love annoying Steve by showing him
I'm
my.
not coming back to this podcast. You've actually written on the pages of the book. Is that? Please tell me, it's pencil and list.
suddenly bending the tips is not so bad, is it?
Well, well, we're talking different prison sentences, but is it at least pencil?
No, some of it is pen. I just grabbed what it was nearby.
That is just so not cool. Like, well, hang on. In a way, it could be like if you were to lend that book to your husband or your future children or something like that. That may be an interesting
Maybe, yeah,
idea,
yeah, yeah.
but
I like that.
I
That's
can firmly say no corners folded in my library, no annotations on the side of the page of any of my books.
I I got your back, Susanna. Every time you bring up the bending of the pages, I
Yeah,
scandalize
yeah.
people even more.
I think when you post this, Varsha and Susanna, I think we need photos of our versions of Mort. You'll see my pristine paperback purchased in 1999.
Ooh.
Pages are a bit
Wow.
yellow, but that's it. And then we can have photos of the desecration of your books, which are even hardbacks.
Okay, I'll put in little. Send me a picture, and I'll put in little things on the thumbnail for anyone who
Yeah,
wants
yeah,
to
yeah.
look that deeply.
Yeah, I mean, because that's also one of the things like I said, these books, started reading them last century. So when I pick them up now, the pages are a little bit yellow.
Mm,
They've been with me in the UK. I moved them over to Spain. Those humid climates, so the pages are yellowy, and it really does feel like going way back um,
A quarter
before
of a century.
before I reincarnated as a mildly responsible father. So different times.
Very nice. Yeah,
But
it's nice to look back on when you last read this. For me, it was only 2 years ago, but to have read it quite so long ago before so much life happened, that's interesting. And you still have the same copy. That's pretty cool.
no, they're pretty. They're very well looked after, and they are sitting on their own shelf over there. Actually, they're keeping company. Top shelf is Discworld, bottom shelf is the Wheel of Time, and there's an obvious reason for that. So, yeah.
Oh, interesting. Your favorite against your least favorite.
Pretty
Or-
much. Yeah.
Cool. Anything else about Mort or Discworld or life that we want to bring up?
Well, just that introduction to the characters properly. I mean, we've met that before. Just again, I think it was a genius idea to write that or to put that speech in capital, in just in caps. I mean, genius idea. That's it. That's all in the end. Is just how it stands out. Anyway, um, I think it appeared before, yes, but this we understand the characters so much better, and we understand, the Discworld's people, the relation to death, so much better as well. And I think knowing the little bit that I know about the universe from the games and from my husband, etc., I think it laid down a lot of groundwork here for later. Um, Stuff that we'll see in the Mage College. Um, I'm pretty sure that the House of Rapes is going to make more appearances. That all these places, and I think they're going to come up later, and looking forward to it. And it must have been really fun to read this, without knowing what was coming next. So,
The problem is, I say the problem is very much its own thing. There's nothing like Discworld out there. Nothing you've read before can prepare you for this. And I think there is I said, I think in past episodes, I think there's a barrier to overcome. And it's those funny, well, you got some serious covers, but I've got the original covers by Paul Kippy. And there's all this very cartoonish, funny looking, comedic thing to it. And I'm sorry to repeat what I said in previous episodes. It's like, I took my fantasy seriously, and I could not compute that there would be this thing poking fun at this genre that I so really loved and enjoyed. So I think there's a slight barrier to overcome, but once you are in, there's a lot to enjoy, possibly more than in many, many, many other fantasy series. And I think there's nothing like her, and there would be nothing like her, because anyone that tries to do something like this is going to be a pale imitation. So
no, the prose is the part of these books, because it wouldn't have worked otherwise. It's very hard to write fantasy for adults, especially adults who don't like, or no, people who don't generally like fantasy. Because fantasy readers, they might get annoyed with this because no, it's not high fantasy and it's whimsical, but it's still fantasy, so they'll probably read it. But this was aimed at just adults who liked fiction, and we created this world that it's very easy to grasp because it captures the essences of the things that we are all familiar with and puts it in this fantasy world, but without the prose to make the silly sound clever, to pull it off, to keep us entertained. This would just be silly, and and he knows exactly where to stop as well, because it's very easy to cross the line between satire and parody, and he keeps it in that perfect balance of satire without insulting the reader's intelligence and without insulting pretty much anyone. I mean, if you are really, really sensitive, you might get insulted about one or two jokes. But I don't think so. If you are an adult reading this, you're always going to find a chuckle in it.
Mm.
And that's brilliant. And I haven't come across anyone who managed to pull it off consistently. You have moments of wit and bits of satire in several stories that moments scenes that are very well, but an entire novel, 30 of them, yeah, because it doesn't get repetitive either, as far as I know. So brilliant.
But
Yeah.
do do you think, both of you, that it requires some familiarity with the fantasy genre before
Yeah.
diving into Discworld?
Oh yeah, he's using all the tropes and then just plays with them.
So
He's
I
juggling
think
them.
I think you need to know fantasy to appreciate those parts of it, but I think there is quite a lot that doesn't require that background that is still that you can still appreciate without the fantasy background. Like you said, Jose, I think it's its own thing. And definitely the first two or even the first four books have a lot of fantasy stuff that it plays on or subverts or like does differently. But even without knowing that, I think there's a lot in and of itself that is there to appreciate. Like and I think I wasn't very well read in the fantasy genre. I still am not when I first started reading Discworld, but I had read Woodhouse and Douglas Adams, and this felt like home in those aspects. Like I appreciated the jokes, I appreciated the commentary on people, and yeah, but I agree with you, Susanna, that like the parts that are playing on fantasy tropes, I didn't get until like I didn't catch the farm boy thing until the reread. I didn't know it the first time I read it. So, but I think in terms of like commentary on the human condition, so to speak, death is such a great tool, and he makes and he does it like brilliantly. He doesn't hyper focus on it or overuse it. There was this one moment in the Light Fantastic when I think people are losing their mind and trying to blame the wizards because of the comet that's coming in the sky, and Death says, "This death of the mind, I don't understand." And there's a similar scene in this one where it's a lot milder, but someone's drowned a bunch of kittens, and Death gets very angry in this book. So he's such a great tool, and of course there's that like simple conga scene that you had mentioned earlier, Jose. It's like he's this external observer of humanity, so he's using him to great effect to make jabs at us and sort of bring some introspection to the reader, which I think is fantastic. Is such a great tool, Death, as a character to do that with.
Yeah, you just raised a great point, isn't it? That Death spends his time collecting dead people, and there's a great scene in the Shades where these three hoodlums gang up, but then two of them get killed. So all of a sudden, the third one gets scared of being there by himself, and again, it's that sort of pack mentality, but also the fact that Death feels no emotions when collecting the souls of the dead and seeing everything that happens. And yet, if someone kills a kitten, he feels really angry and upset. And it's like, and it's again another commentary on the human condition that we have wars going on, we have famines going on, we have disasters going on, and we can just put all that aside. But as soon as we see someone mistreating an animal, we make a big deal out of it when there are so many bigger issues to worry about, and it's just part of what we do. And it's just the observation. There's no judgment.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
just
exactly.
thrown in there. He just was a master of that. Like the whole series is incredible, and I'd recommend if for anyone that hasn't watched them, there's a couple of his conferences slash talks when he was nearing his own death, when he talked about the right to choose and things like that. We just hearing him talk and speak about these subjects is very poignant, and the way he approaches on death. Um, was very emotional for me to see when it happened.
Mm.
And to hear Neil Gaiman talk about Terry Pratchett after he died is also very, very poignant as well. So they were really good friends. And this novel was suggested to Sir Terry Pratchett by Neil Gaiman. He was the one that said, "Oh, you should write a novel about death." Um,
Hmm. I think there was an introduction in, maybe it was in the Kindle edition. I forget how I read it, but that Neil Gaiman wrote to that book, and it was Mort, I think. And it was like, I was only barely familiar with Terry Pratchett as an author, but it brought tears to my eyes. I think that was a very poignant introduction too. So yeah, I'll go check that video out, Jose. Thanks for sharing. Cool. Anything else before we wrap up?
Not for me.
Okay.
Go
In that
read.
case,
Go read it.
yes, go read Mort. And we'll see everybody back next month for Sorcery. Meanwhile, Susanna, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter and the Page Swing Forum.
Very nice. And Jose.
Yeah, I can be found on the pagetruin.com forums. You can find my YouTube channel, Horses Amazing Worlds, and the podcast Fantasy Talks Live. And sorry, a bit of self-promotion, but I strongly recommend last week's interview slash conversation with Christopher Rocchio, author of the Sanity series, and his editor, David Butler, and the wonderful Susanna as well. There, we had a cracking time talking to both of them. So I would strongly recommend, not because of any clever questions, but because of the clever answers they gave us.
Very nice. Yeah, go check that out. And we'll be posting these on my channel and maybe one of these wonderful people's channels as well. Mine is called Reading by the Rainy Mountain. It's also going to be available as a podcast, but only on Spotify because I'm only using the podcast platform to publish easily to YouTube. But yeah, we'll see everybody in about a month from now with Sorcery. Thank you so much for listening, and see you next time. Bye.